I'll be speaking with Nadya Tannous. She's active in the Palestinian Youth Movement USA. She's Palestinian American herself, and she'll be talking to us today from San Francisco. Good evening.
Hi, Stanley. Thank you for having me.
So tell us about this action that took place in San Francisco at the Russian Consulate a few days before Christmas.
Yeah, so on the 22nd, the Palestinian Youth Movement basically sent out a call to our local communities here to come with us in the morning to the Russian consulate and do a die-in at the front door, basically to call for Syrian self-determination and to really call out Russia for its involvement in Syria and in backing the Assad regime.
Mm-hmm. And when you say die-in, could you describe it in some detail?
Yeah, so we had really big banners that we posted onto the front gate of the Russian consulate, and we had maybe about 20 people covered in white shirts with blood splattered on them, so red paint splattered on them, lying all across the pavement right in front of the consulate. We also had a book of condolences that said, sign our book of condolences for the 450,000 Syrians killed. And we had a bunch of other...
Was that a sort of a reference also to the Soviet ambassador in Germany who had been killed that day? Was that a...
that was in reference to the ambassador, Kharkov, who had been shot in Turkey.
I'm sorry, in Turkey.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it was.
Because a lot of big dignitaries, of course, expressed condolences to Russia for that and have done very little about Syria.
Absolutely.
So how many people took part in the die-in?
I would say probably between 20 and 30 bodies were actually lying down in front of the consulate at one time. But I would say there was a strong 40 to 50 people at the action as a whole. And they ranged from members of the Palestinian Youth Movement to Syrians who live in the Bay Area to many other people who are in solidarity. Members of Anak Bayan, which is one of the Filipino student and grassroots movements in the Bay Area, also came to support.
And what did some of the signs say? I saw some pictures of them.
Yeah, so we had one of the larger banners said, "No Assad, no Russia, no ISIS, no USA, Syrian self-determination now." And in little hearts it had all of the different factions that make up Syria, meaning ethno-religious factions. So you had the Assyrians, Kurds, Christians, Shia, Sunni, Alawite, Druze, etc., Armenians, and that was a really large banner, basically to state that we do not support any sort of imperialism or imperial power in Syria, and we really are calling for self-determination, for Syrian self-determination, for a democratic future, which is a truly democratic future does also not include Assad's brutal regime.
Mm-hmm. Now, did you shut down the building? Did the police come? Were there arrests? How about those things?
We know that the police were called. However, they did a roll-by, but they didn't actually stop. We did shut down the building for the first 2 hours of operation. There were certain people who were waiting to come into the consulate for different things, and they couldn't come in until about 10 p.m., 10 a.m., 10:30 a.m. when the action came to a close.
How about, I'm sorry, finish?
Oh, no, go ahead, Stanley.
How about passerbys? How did people react? And what did the press, the media think?
Yeah, so we had a couple of news stations come out from Bay Area News, and people were very interested as to see, what we were doing. I think media here, and so were passerbyers. Many passerbyers stopped. Many neighbors stopped. The Russian consulate in San Francisco is kind of in a more residential area. It's not seeing a lot of foot traffic, but we definitely had people going for their morning runs, or people who were walking from one block to the other, kind of asking us what we were doing and what we stood for. And I think the visual of so many bodies physically lying down covered in what looks like blood right in front of the consulate was really a powerful image, because in a way it speaks for itself, especially one of the signs in the back said Aleppo is burning.
Mm-hmm. Now, why did your group get active over the issue of Syria? You're a Palestinian group.
Absolutely. I think, we see it as one and the same. Before the borders were divided up in the Middle East by European powers, we were part of Greater Sham, and we still are part of Greater Syria, although we are Palestinians. I think for ourselves, there are so many Palestinians that live in Syria or lived in Syria as part of the larger diaspora. And for ourselves, I mean, the struggle against tyranny and authoritarianism and imperialism, it's all related to the struggle against Zionism and settler colonialism in the region. We've been displaced from our homelands, and as Palestinians, we know what that feels like after almost 70 years. And I think, as I said, some of us are displaced in Syria because of the Assad regime, and they're protracted refugees at this point. They're coming into that stage of 6 years. Some people in exile, and I think fundamentally, Stanley, we share values with Syrians who call for dignity and freedom and for their own self-determination. As Palestinians, we've been calling for the same things for many, many years, and we stand strongly with our Syrian brothers and sisters and ourselves, really.
I understand. Could you tell me a bit about yourself? Where in Palestine is your family from?
My family is from Jaffa, which is on the coast. In 1948, my grandparents were, and most of my family were forcibly pushed out of Jaffa, and my grandparents actually ended up in Jordan. But we do have family who ended up in Syria, in Lebanon, in Egypt, and who actually were in Gaza until a few years ago.
How about the family that's in Syria? Are they in danger, or have they had a very tough time?
So my family who was in Syria actually left Syria in the 70s. And so we don't have much close family there anymore. However, I have many connections because I was a student in Syria in Damascus in 2010. So I do know many people who lived there and who I was students with, for example, who are now living in exile.
Aha, so you were in Syria in 2010, so what was that like politically, let's say?
Well, I mean, at the time, Assad was very much in power, and there wasn't any question that was visible, at least, to his regime, although we know that for many, many years, both himself and his father have a long history of brutality against political activists and students alike. But, at that time, there was a very strong regime hold, and you could find very few people who publicly would say anything against him. And I actually went to Hama in 2010. I went up and visited somebody there, and it was incredible. We entered Hama on this bus coming up from Damascus, and Damascus, and there was a huge statue standing at the first roundabout in Hama, and it was a statue of Hafez al-Assad, who's Bashar's father, standing there waving with one hand, and in the other hand he had a fist. Basically there's a long history with Hafez al-Assad. He crushed Hama and bulldozed about 90% of the town, so only about 10% of the historic district was left in 2010. And he killed tens of thousands of people, and it was it was a total disaster, and it was a massacre. But what people in Hama used to whisper is that while in one hand he was waving, and the other hand, the fist, that was him crushing Hama. Mm-hmm. So even at the time, you could feel dissent, but the power was of the regime was very, very strong, very much unchallenged.
I understand. So tell me more about the Palestinian Youth Movement group. What does it do? How long has it been around?
Yeah, so Palestinian Youth Movement, actually, we just had our 10-year anniversary, and we are a transnational movement of Palestinian youth. We started with chapters across the world, in Brazil, in Spain, in England, in Palestine, in Jordan, in Syria. Actually, Syria was one of the founding chapters of PYM, and in the United States. And, we've ebbed and flowed with different chapters, and it's very difficult to maintain certain chapters. For example, the chapter in Syria is totally defunct. But, yeah, we've been around for quite a while, and it's really wonderful to have a transnational movement for Palestinian youth in the diaspora and also at home.
That's great.
And it connects us, and we're able, through this forum, to really speak about what our future looks like, and what different needs on the ground are, and what we're able to do to support Palestine, and also to do intersectional work with others.
Have you had other kinds of demonstrations about Syria or Palestine or other issues?
This is our most recent action about Syria. However, yes, we've had plenty of actions and movements around Palestine. For example, during the sieges in Gaza and the different attacks, we've been very vocal and visible throughout the Bay Area, and different chapters as well throughout the United States.
Grand. Last question. If people want to find out more, maybe even contact you, what would be a good website or email or any of those things?
Yeah, you can check out our Facebook at Palestinian Youth Movement, or PYM, and you can also visit our webpage, which if you type it into Google, you'll find pal.youth.movement. But the webpage itself is, let's see, or actually you can email PYM at pal-youth.org.
That's great. Thank you very much for talking with me.
Thank you, Stanley.